Hello, hello.
I would like to apologize because we are a little late, but you will understand because you know this day was a historical day and a very long one. It's a day full of surprises for many of the decisive matters for Iraq and the Iraqis. The Iraqis have exercised in their first time in their history since during the last 50 years, for the first time, a real democratic act by holding elections on this land, this great land of ours. We exerted all efforts, my colleagues in the Commission, and in particular my colleague, the head of the election department, Mr. Adil al-Nawi, and many of hard work that tired us, in fact, but we are in fact very happy because this day has finally ended. We have actually registered a new precedent in Iraq, that is holding a democratic elections, that the Iraqi voter can go to the voting centers freely. He does not find anybody behind him to order him to vote for this list or for this person or that person. This was an introduction that was necessary after this long day. Now I will give the opportunity to my colleague and friend, Mr. Adil al-Nawi, to announce some of the matters related to the end of this period and similar things that must be announced now. At 5 p.m. of this day, we closed all of the voting centers in Iraq, and with the exception of the lines that remain in these voting centers, and I believe now that all the centers are closed and they resumed the process of tallying the votes in the voting centers and in the presence of local observers and representatives of the political structures and international observers in some areas. In fact, we received different reports from voting centers, even in the security reports, the last of which was regarding the city of Baghdad in particular. There were some regrettable incidents, such as the falling of a mortar on a school in the Al-Amir area or neighborhood, and there are no damages or injured. There was also in Rawdat al-Bara'im fi Bayagh, and the forces of the national sources were able to recognize the source of the fire. And also in al-Bay'a area, in al-Bay'a, there were 7 people injured there. Received injuries. Also, this Shuhada school in Al-Amil area was exposed to an aggression that led to the martyrdom of one of the citizens and injuring several individuals. The Osama bin Zaid school in the Al-Amil area and the Kamil Shabib school in the Al-Jami'a area were subjected to 2 suicidal attacks by suicidal people. Madrasat Abu Shir, 8 terrorists were arrested while they were trying to assault the center. A suicidal man makes another operation, death of 2 people and injury of 10 people. In this Al-Quds or Jerusalem school, a suicidal person killed himself and led to the 2 casualties. In Rasafa sector, the city of Sadr, the school of Fida, 2 mortars fell, and in New Baghdad, the center of number 70, 05, there was explosive materials and a belt that led to the martyrdom of 3 policemen inspectors. The results, God willing, are very promising. And as we mentioned before, the approximate numbers that we received based on estimations of some people in our centers through the flow of people in the process, the tallying will start, and counting the votes, and will start tonight, and it has started already in some centers and will continue until the morning of tomorrow. Then the results will be sent to the National Center to recount the numbers and putting it into the computers. There is a matter that we must mention, that is that according to the systems that were made by the Commission, there was silence in the media regard to the political structure. It started 48 hours ago. The process started this morning and ended, as my colleague here mentioned, at 5 p.m. So this silence or gag in the media now, no political structure can speak, because the media person ended with the end of voting for the National Assembly. Now there are some indicators, several indicators that came from some of the election centers, because there are questions regarding some of the percentages related to with the participation of women. It was said, for example, in Diwaniyya, the participation of women were about 45% of the voters, those who participated in the election. In Misan, the centers were closed and the women were approximately about 65% by comparison with the percentage of men. The percentage in Najaf also and in other centers was about 45 to 55% of the voters, and there was a great turnout for the electors in Basra and Muthalla, and the percentage of women also was high there. Of course, the areas of Kurdistan region, the percentage was very good. Also, there were participation, because as we have mentioned in the morning, a center was of Latifiyya was closed, and now it was opened later on, and there was participation. So it wasn't a large participation, but this center was open, and God willing, the results will be turned in during the coming times. And in this way, we can say that the wheel started turning, the wheel of establishing democracy in the country through the beginning of the first election process. And in this way, we would have established or put the trail on the road, and now we are marching toward our future and a prosperous Iraq. With regard to the complaints and the oppositions, it was all political in nature, and as of tomorrow, such such complaints will be delivered to the center itself, or to the office of election in the governorate, or to the national office here in Baghdad. It will be viewed and confirmed, and providing answer to it as soon as possible. If you have any questions, please go ahead. Middle East news agents, Dr. Adil, we want the percentage of participation. You spoke about the number 72%, and then you spoke now about estimations. Are these numbers estimations, or is it numbers according to the register of the voters? In fact, we are in contact hourly with the election offices in the governorates, which contact the voting centers. So it's a series of contacts. There was a high percentage of turnout. For example, I have contacted some election centers in the governorates, and they gave me these figures I spoke about, and it is an estimated percentage to what have taken place. In fact, one of the election centers have 5 stations, meaning 25 voters. So they see that there is about 2,000 voters. So they estimate the percentage on that basis. The actual percentages and numbers will come after the tallying of the votes, which have started and will be announced, God willing, after the end of the process at the national office in Baghdad. From the Middle East News Agency, the gentleman from these are estimation based on the flow of people, the human flow. The director of the center and the officials of the election centers, that they have long lines, and he began to make some anticipations and saying that this is 50 or 70% or 90%. The human flow does not mean that it was based on the official register, because it is too early at the present to say that the official registers gave us 60 or 70%. So some of the media understood that the percentage is the real percentage in the register, but the register has not been established yet. So it is a very short period. Therefore, after a few hours, we will be able to give you, or a very short period, we'll be able to give you the real figures based on the figures presented by the election district.
Rod Northern from the
For Northern,
do you have an estimate, though,
from USA, do you have a
more than 50%?
Well, till now I can't tell you, because if I say something, only I am guessing now. But we can't tell you everything maybe tomorrow or after tomorrow, so it will be better to wait till tomorrow or after tomorrow.
What would your guess be, though? I don't mind to guess at this point. What would your guess be?
Well, we have guessed before that. We said that about 8 million will participate, and this is not only guessing, because we don't have any records from the last year or or year before that. We can't say now everything, only to guess that maybe 8 million or maybe less, maybe more. I don't know. Thank you.
Shaker Ahmed
from Sharqiyya News channel. What is the percentage of the actual participation in the two governorates, Mosul and Anbar? In these two governorates, there was, of course, an exception by the Commission. A decision was taken to have a day of registration and voting at the same time. Now the two governorates, the voting centers were open, but also the people of these governorates voted in other governorates. For example, the people of the Fallujah who are outside of Fallujah or outside of the governorate of Ramadi, the 3 centers were open for them in Baghdad, and yet they can vote in any place in any other governorate without voting on the Council of the Governorate. So there are 3 centers in Baghdad. They can vote for the Government Council and the National Assembly. Later, these will be added after the tally of the vote, and will, of course, deduct from it the people of Naylawa and Lambar. But in the Anbar, the numbers there were very good. By contrast to our estimations, we only opened the voting centers there, but no registration offices, because it was impossible to open it at that time. So we did not expect a lot of turnout, but we found a lot of people are standing in the line in Anbar and the outskirts and some other districts. Also, in the Mosul governorate, the same thing happened. I would like to add one thing here. So long as that the elections are over now, I heard a lot of my brothers, that most of those who wanted to vote in Mosul and Anbar moved to the rural areas, and there they voted at the voting centers in Rabia and places similar to that in the villages. These villages, people are far for people to go to. So, but this they did on their own, and the requests were coming to the Commission this morning to send more election material because they needed, and because there was a high turnout in these areas. For example, an area here, it has our brothers from Fallujah also. We opened for them a center near the University of Baghdad, because there were some groups from Fallujah who lived there, so that they can vote. And my colleague knows that the people of Fallujah or Mosul can register and vote at the same time, according to a statement that was made in the past. Washington Post, I wanted أريد فقط
earlier were just guesses, and are you also saying, I mean, the one I'm most curious about is West Baghdad 95%, or Salahuddin 60%, and the overall figure 72%?
No. في غرب بغداد.
West, in the Karkh area, our anticipation for Al-Karkh was that participation will be weak in some areas. For example, the Dora area, Latifiyya, Yusufiyya, Al-Amiriyya. And we did not expect to have this turnout, but voting centers were open, not in all areas. In Al-Karkh, we expected 700 voting centers in Al-Karkh alone, We opened less than that because of these areas. So those who went to the open centers were high number. For example, the center al-Jihad neighborhood or al-Furat, there were centers that were opened in one center. So there was a lot of turnout in these centers because it included several areas. It took the place of other centers in one center. Therefore, the participation was good in the Karkh area.
Thank you,
Just
I wanted
numbers that you gave us at 3 o'clock today, the numbers that you said were approximately correct for 2 p.m. Are those numbers still correct? Were those numbers at the time based on actual voter turnout, or were they approximations? And I was wondering if you could update those numbers as of now. If you could give them to us at 3, can you also give them to us now, updated several hours later?
No.
Okay.
No.
Yes, these numbers was sent to us by the offices in the governorates of Iraq based on real contact with the field by the directors of the centers and their anticipations based on the long lines and large numbers. This what was the directors mentioned. We will announce the final results after a few days. But this statement will not be approved by the Council of the Commission until the period of complaints is ended. After that, the Council of the Commission will approve the final results, perhaps after a period that is not short.
If I could follow up.
Those numbers that you gave at 3 o'clock, were they based on actual numbers of people coming into the polling stations, or were they based on a director looking out at a line, seeing maybe 400 people and saying 400 people times 7 hours is X amount? If this is the number that would represent X percentage of the total?
Yeah, this one, the second one.
That is exactly what we can call the degree of flow during the time period, the flow of the voters. This is, and we depend on it, and God willing, you will find that the actual figures close to these numbers in the final results. The elections are, in fact, is a very costly process here in Iraq. The Commission, in fact, also received several reactions from certain circles regarding the success of this process, and many people agree with us among the political structures who sent their own representatives to the various governorates in Iraq to observe the election process and to look at it closely. Dr. Farid, you know, after the end of the voting that you have entered history from its widest doors. What is your feeling now after the end of the election and the fact that matters went well? Feeling, all of us, myself and my colleagues, and I believe all of the Iraqis have the same feeling, that we have accomplished a very important task, and we seal a historical day in Iraq. Iraq lacked the basis and the principles that can, upon which the election process can be established. And now we have established these principles and bases to help our people and the journalists who accompanied us during this long period. We established these principles to be the framework, the first and the final for a continuous election process. They will be fixed bases for the elections in the future, and we will be similar to the civilized countries of the world. They will be always free elections. Nobody can try to influence anybody. We will try to preserve and protect the rights of the Iraqi citizens. And this was a very difficult task, but thank God we were able to accomplish it. And we would like to, we are grateful to everybody, not to ourselves only. Please go ahead. Abu Dhabi TV station. Microphone, 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 microphone. It was announced a few days ago that the tallying of the voice and the announcement of the results may take 10 days. Do we need 10 days, in fact? And when we think about ourselves as journalists, for 10 days, we will always be getting new news or about the results and the tallying of the votes so that we can stay in Baghdad for 10 days. My question is, you have mentioned a few minutes ago some of the incidents, and you characterized it as regrettable, and it have affected the voting process, and you were compelled to close some centers that were subjected to aggression. The tallying of voices, of course, began, as we said, at the voting centers after the transfer of the boxes and the ballots to the national center. We will begin to put the information into the computer and announcing it in its final form. Daily, there will be announcements about the stage that the results reached. Every day we will give you the results of every stage daily, supported by relative numbers for these for the tallying. We have established the ceiling 10 days. Perhaps it could be less than 10 days, and God willing, we are optimistic that it will be conducted as soon as possible. With regard to the second question, which is the influence of these incidents on the elections, I would like to say that Baghdad, or the streets of Baghdad, was not filled with blood as the threat mentioned by the terrorist groups. And it was not, the cities was not flooded in blood as some messages have indicated, messages that came to us from some people. There were many matters that happens every day in Baghdad. It took place today as well, and we confess to that, and we admit that. But it did not affect in a way that could hamper the election process or hamper its progress forward. Yes. The terrorists today have devised the explosive belts, but that is not to their honor. They tried to kill the innocent people. They were killing those who want to exercise their absolute right and freedom to vote. They directed a message to us, the message of killing, and we directed to them the message of elections and freedom and democracy. Washington Times.
Us how many international observers were deployed during this election? Where were they deployed? And have they come up with any independent analysis or estimates of the vote?
In fact, we have a register, a record of 199 international observers that belonging to various international organizations, including organizations and some political structures, as well as some embassies. They are deployed, of course, in the places that are more secure, and the northern governorates. And in fact, we have not received any reports from them until now. Perhaps tomorrow we will receive the reports of all of the representatives of the structures and the local as well as international observers.
I'm still not quite clear how the directors of the polling centers determined the flow of the voters. How did they do that?
Well, they have estimated that the flow of the voters are coming is 60% or 70%, like that. They gave it like that to our headquarters, and that's why the numbers which they are announced afternoon, it was based on some estimation from those people which are wide of us from Kirkuk or Erbil or Basra or Diqar or other cities. They said that we have 80%, we have 70%. So it has been understood here that this is final or something official numbers, but it was only estimations. Thank you. Yes, sir.
To come back to these figures, if the turnout was 72% at 2 o'clock today, and there were long queues in all the polling centres, presumably it's gone up since then. Would you describe this estimate as a little optimistic or plausible? What's your opinion, since you didn't compile these figures?
These percentages that we received from the voting centers are based on their own estimations and what they have seen, in fact. Also, we received bigger figures, bigger estimations. It is based on observation and upon their own senses and their interaction with the lines and the flow of people. They imagine the director of a center who sits and he may be afraid of some attacks, security attacks. For example, there was a woman that delivered a child in one of the voting centers, a person that is injured and has to be was brought from the hospital to the voting centers, and other cases that we will give it to you later on. We want to document it with pictures and will be announced later. This flow encouraged us a lot, so that during the final hours there were still lines, and they noticed the flow on the television and the reports of the journalists.
Can you just say if you expected it to go this well, did it go better than you expected, especially after all these threats to disrupt it with violence, the elections?
Well, for us, we have to wait the results till tomorrow or after tomorrow. We can say according to the official results. We expect that the good turnout will be here. We will have it, and I think it will be better to wait till tomorrow. Yeah.
The final question. بعض المراقبين لم يستطيع أن يصدرون كيف يمكنكم أن تضمن شفافية عملية العد وبالتالي عملية الانتخابات نفسها. Whoever were not able to reach the voting centers are the international observers, most definitely. But in all of the voting centers, there are local observers from the governmental organizations and NGOs and organizations registered here at the conference center. There are also the representatives of the political structures and parties. We have a list of more than 45,000 representatives of political structures and parties in this process. Also, the local press in the governorates and the press in Baghdad, and I believe we have seen the coverage, the media coverage on the satellite stations. All of this gives the process a great transparency. The last question. Los Angeles Times, هل يمكن أن تعرفنا عدد مراكز التصويت المفتوحة بالفعل كم عدد المراكز التي لم تفتح؟ The voting centers that were opened, in fact, today, and we received reports from it, was 5,171. 5,171 voting centers were open. The number that we intended to open up till 2 days ago was 5,231 center for voting. وأين كانت هذه المراكز التي
لم تفتح مراكز الاقتراع؟
the voting centers in some areas did not open. Instead of opening 4 centers in some disturbed areas, we provided only 1 center, and people were moved to these centers. Even some voters used some buses and were able to get support from some of the local people and the police.
140 in Fallujah, and it has been open only 40. That's why there was such differences.
And how about Mosul?
The same. Yeah, the same.
There was no diminishment.
In Mosul, we opened about 86 centers for voting, 40 inside Mosul and 46 outside of Mosul, and in the neighborhoods and the outskirts of the city.
Tom Osser, Night Raider again. I was wondering if you
could walk us through the same numbers for other, as we've been calling them today, hotspots, like Samara, Mahmoudiya, Latafiya, Ramadi, and if you, and I missed the second part of the Mosul numbers, if you could give those again. Again, the number of stations that were supposed to be open and the number of stations that did open, please. Thank you.
Now, in fact, we are waiting for the final report that will be announced either after 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock this evening or tomorrow morning. We will give you the total centers that were open, because, in fact, there are some centers that were attacked, and it was replaced on the same day, and the voters went to the new centers. There was an announcement made in the area, and many people began to inform each other. As I told you, the centers that were supposed to be open was 5,230, but we opened only 5,171 because of this movement. The security situation is changeable always, and it is stable here, and an hour later it is unstable. So we deal with each case separately, and in fact we moved some centers to nearer centers so that the voters would not suffer. آخر سؤال.
2 little clarifiers. The number of centers that you wished to open was 5,320, and now you're saying 5,230.
And read the statistic first.
And the second thing is, are you going to do this again today, or is this the last briefing we're going to get?
It was 5,230 and became, and I said it 320. It is possible that we will hold another press conference if it is necessary, or if we receive new additional information and important, we will hold another press conference, and we'll announce that in time. Tomorrow, God willing, there will be another conference with new information. We will establish a full schedule of all the centers that we wanted to open and the centers that did not open, and those who were open and closed. If this is useful to the press, we will establish a schedule, and we will distribute it to all of the journalists. And this is a very easy matter. The number was 5,232. 5,232. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you very soon. And have a nice evening.
I will mention certain topics. I will not go on for long. I will mention certain subjects that we consider a very proud day. Today, Iraqis defeated terrorists the Zarqawi and the Qaeda organization announced war against this political process, but they have failed today. The Iraqis have spread throughout the streets of Iraq and defeated terrorists and took their role in the electoral process. Today, terrorists have lost the war. They did not want to see Iraq as a victorious country, but today it is a historic victory for Iraqis. And the only goal for the oncoming government is to achieve security and prosperity for Iraqis. We would like to thank all the media organizations that had a great role in today's process, and we thank them for their efforts and for covering the events in a very fair way. We would also like to acknowledge the efforts of the IECI for the efforts in facilitating the process, the electoral process. I will take our questions. Will the emergency laws be extended for another period? As for the emergency laws, the Prime Minister did actually extend them 2 days earlier for 30 days throughout the country, and after that we will look into any further extensions. Will tomorrow be a public holiday? Yes, it will be a public holiday, and the curfew will end at 6 a.m. Al-Sharqiyya channel. Are there any polling stations that were attacked in this time, in the recent few hours? And also, till what extent will the curfew be extended? The curfew will end tomorrow at 6 a.m. As for attacks on polling stations, we would like to thank God for because we anticipated worse conditions and attacks, but things went out quite well, and the Iraqi people were very happy during this process, and they participated in throughout all Iraqi regions. We were able to defeat the terrorists, and this means that the terrorists will have very limited abilities now, and the Iraqi security forces, which include the forces of the Ministry of Interior, Defense, and the multinational forces, they all participated and saved no efforts in securing this process, and now we have quite capable security forces to foil any terrorist attacks.
We've had some confusing messages today from the IECI regarding voter turnout. I just wonder if the government has any view of how well the turnout was. And secondly, I understand what you're saying about security, but there were nearly a dozen suicide bombings. Dozens of people were killed today. How can you say that, that this was a total victory?
Well, let me answer your first question. I know there was some confusion, but I just talked to the people who's been in charge. They have been seeing, the people who standing in line to vote, and they were surprised because it's long lines. So they just give the numbers, because they are really happy about the participation of the Iraqi people. The actual number, we will have it when they count the votes. So I think up until now it's participation, and I think in very close future we'll have the number. Regarding the second questions that you mentioned, as you know, everybody was expecting worse what had happened. I think it's a victory because we have a lot of participation in the Iraqi voters, and comparing to the incidents that happened, it's not a big number, and we think that we succeed and we really defeat the terrorists. Thank you. Please.
The voter participation and the numbers that you're speaking of took place under an incredible, massive security blanket. what happens when that blanket is raised? What happens when you don't have so many people on the street, the borders are reopened, the curfews are gone, travel restrictions are lifted, and you go back to the situation where you were in 24 hours ago?
Well, it's not like that. I mean, our forces, I mean, the government and the Prime Minister have been working so hard to build our security forces, and we are building our forces, and we have been capturing the key people on the al-Qaeda network, and we think, and we know actually, that we are going to keep detain this terrorist, and in very close future we will try to contain the situation and get rid of this incidents and get rid of this terrorist. So we're going forward, and we will try to minimize the attacks and control the situation in Iraq.
بس للتوضيح في يوم ايه تم تمديد
Till what day has the emergency laws been extended? The Prime Minister signed an extension of 30 days for the emergency laws. Thank you very much.
Can you wait just 2 minutes? I want to clarify something.